Welcome to The Agile Speaker, where we're learning about the science behind the art of speaking. I'm Marianne Johnston, and if you listen to the last episodes in this season, you'll know we've been looking at a specific area around the skills of presenting and speaking, which is managing the stress or anxiety you might feel in the run-up to a presentation or meeting. Following the previous conversations in this season, it struck me that one of the reasons why we might feel stressed or anxious about presenting could be that we lack self-trust. I use the word confidence frequently when working with clients. Clients will often say they feel they lack confidence or that they want to feel more confident. But I've noticed with a few people that it seems to be something deeper. It's not confidence that's always the issue. It might be self-trust or a lack of self-trust. You might have a job interview coming up. Perhaps you're changing careers and are doubting whether your skills from your old job will apply to a new industry. Or perhaps you've been made redundant recently. Or returning to work after family leave, that can be a worrying time. Or you might be experiencing the menopause, where common experiences are brain fog, lack of sleep, low mood, and hot flushes. These are all situations where our trust in ourselves to be able to perform or succeed can begin to erode. If this feels familiar, then you've come to the right place. I'm chatting with Antonia Siegel from Healthy Habits. She's a mindset and behavior change coach, specializing in wellness and menopause, supporting clients through challenging times. Antonia, it's lovely to be chatting with you again.
Hi, thanks for having me back again. It seems like ages ago that we recorded the last podcast, but I don't know how long ago that actually was.
Yeah, I think it was about 9 months ago, maybe?
Yeah,
No, my sense of time nowadays is completely distorted.
same. So no, it's really lovely to be back talking about something different. Well, something slightly different than what we were talking about last time, but I'm sure we'll touch on some of the areas that we touched on before as well.
Yeah. So let's start with what self-trust is and why are we talking about it? Do you want to start by defining self-trust?
Sure. Yeah. So self-trust is the belief in your ability to make decisions and take actions that are right for you, even if the outcome is uncertain. So it's about relying on your own judgment, being authentic, being resilient in the face of challenges, and it can be described as the relationship with yourself. So I know you're going to be talking about self-confidence, and perhaps we can find out how one influences the other. Is it chicken and egg?
Good question. Yeah, so confidence I mentioned earlier is probably, I don't know, I feel like that's a more commonly used term.
Yeah.
Self-confidence is your attitude about yourself as opposed to the relationship with yourself. It's your attitude that you can successfully perform tasks or skills. You're positive, assured of your judgment, your abilities, your capacity. So your attitude about yourself and your abilities is healthy and strong. You're not worried about other people's opinions because you know who you are and how you're going to live out your core values. If you have self-confidence, then you know that you're valuable, that you're worthy, and you know who you are. And what's more, you accept the person that you are. So if
Yeah.
you have healthy self-trust and self-confidence, then you'll be more likely to find success both in the workplace and in your personal life. But before you can step forward with confidence, it's important to learn to trust yourself. So I thought we could start by having a look at some examples that our listeners might relate to themselves. But also, these are examples that I think employers or colleagues might relate to for individuals on their teams. Because even if you, our listeners, feel self trust and self confidence, there may be someone else in your professional or personal life who doesn't experience that. So I think there are different hotspots in our lives where this can take place. So as I mentioned, it could be that you've got a job interview coming up, or maybe a change of career. Maybe you've experienced redundancy. What kind of experiences do you see, Antonia, in your work?
Yeah, things such as like returning to work after family leave, quite a scary time for people.
Mm.
It might be after having a baby, it might be following divorce, or people who have been ill or they're grieving the loss of someone. It can even be when women are experiencing menopause and they've been off for some time with their symptoms. Heading back to work can be a scary time, especially in terms of self-trust and self-confidence.
Yeah. And so these are not necessarily situations that are happening all of the time, are they? We might come and go through them as we're moving through life. It could be that it's not necessarily a life event that's happening to you. It could be that something comes up at work which you need to be involved in and it's out of your comfort zone. For example, being asked to present on stage to represent your business. If that's not something you're used to doing, so you don't have previous experience and therefore confidence to build on, then it's quite likely that your self trust alarm bells might be starting to ring. So, why do you think people might lack self trust in these different situations, Antonia?
It's the old adage, isn't it? Comparing ourselves with others. We can feel like others are more capable or more experienced than us. It's that kind of classic imposter syndrome that I'm sure all our listeners and us have felt at some time in their lives. Perfectionism is another one as well. Kind of we can focus too much on our mistakes or our flaws, and kind of create a fear of not being good enough. So trusting yourself means that actually you look after your own needs and your safety instead of striving for perfection. And I know some people struggle with that if you are a perfectionist. Also, it's kind of that fear of judgment, worrying about how others will perceive you or your performance. It's a very real human problem, isn't it? Of the fear, that fear of judgment, that fear of others and what other people's perceptions are of us. We think far too much sometimes, sadly, about what other people think of us instead of kind of focusing on the job in hand.
Absolutely. It's a lot of energy being used up, isn't it, when that happens? Wasted energy. Or it might also be if you've experienced a failure before, then it could be hard to believe in yourself the next time. So
Yeah.
I've definitely got clients who have shared with me that, they've had some sort of bad experience presenting. Something has caused them to feel, I would actually use the word scarred by an experience. I know I certainly have had that in my past, making a presentation at uni, and I can still remember the room in the university building and the group standing in front of me as I delivered a presentation in French about human resources. And
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
have a clue how to make a presentation about that, with zero support about it beforehand. And so you can really feel scarred by a situation where something has gone wrong or you perceive it to have gone badly wrong. So I think that's something that's hard to then believe that you could do better the next time.
Yeah.
But also we might lack self-trust if you haven't practiced, you don't have experience in doing something, and therefore that self-doubt can start to build up. Or maybe some people have tendency to focus on their weaknesses rather than their strengths, because we might tend to err on the side of caution. So that can be natural to focus on the negatives or the weaknesses. But also we might lack self-trust if we notice that we're always seeking reassurance from other people, if we're not backing ourselves. Situations where that might come up. So, for example, if it was a job interview that you had coming up, you mentioned imposter syndrome.
Mm.
Perhaps you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I'm qualified or if I can definitely meet these job requirements. or you're worrying that you're going to say the wrong thing or that you're not going to come across well. But also, I'm sure a lot of people would relate to the thought of comparing yourself to who the other candidates might be and thinking, well, they're bound to be more qualified than I am. Those seeds of doubt are going to be there. And I've definitely seen that with clients as well, where I've helped them with a job interview and they're underselling their achievements. They don't fully trust in their ability to convey those achievements and their value. That can be really tough.
Sure.
About your experiences with self-trust might come up if someone's changing careers, for example.
Yeah, it would be like uncertainty about transferable skills. So doubting whether skills from one field can perhaps apply to a new industry if you're thinking of kind of changing tack. Quite a difficult one for people who've been in their comfort zone for a long time in one industry and are changing to another. I certainly did that myself. I was in a corporate and partnership career in mass participation events and then switched to coaching. And trust me when I say 100% I've had imposter syndrome. And it can be hard. And you do compare, it's like natural. You do compare yourself to others. You look at all the other amazing coaches out there and think, oh Lord, can I can I really do this?
Yeah.
But equally you can only control the controllable, right? You can't control who else is out there. You can always be for someone, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Um, the fear of starting over, so feeling intimidated by the idea of being a beginner again, like I was, 100%. And that we have that resistance to change because change is uncomfortable. We don't like change. We are inherently built, our brain wants to keep us safe. So a lack of self-trust can manifest as resistance to stepping out of a comfortable but possibly unfulfilling career. So I see a lot of clients who are lacking in purpose, they're lacking in direction. They've kind of very, very good at the level they're at the job they're at, but they're like thinking, okay, but this doesn't give me the same purpose or feeling as it used to. Gulp, I'm stuck. What can I do? Another kind of area would be returning to work after family leave that you mentioned. And it's that kind of feeling rusty, feeling out of practice, worrying that you've lost your edge, or perhaps fallen behind on industry trends. Um, Kind of balancing that work and family. It's one I hear a lot. I specialize in an area of life, kind of helping people achieve life balance. And balancing work and family can be really, really tricky, and perhaps doubting your ability to manage both your job and your family responsibilities. And that always takes time after you come back after family leave. It just takes time, doesn't it? And sometimes we want to, yeah, we want to feel comfortable now. And unfortunately that, it just takes time. And also again, that fear of judgment. So concern that colleagues or your employers will question your commitment or competence, perhaps after time away. Um, so maybe like a mum returning to her job after a year off. So she might question whether she can still perform at the same level as before, despite being and knowing that actually she's highly capable. She might feel uncertain in meetings or shy away from taking on challenging tasks because she fears she's no longer as competent or as up to date.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think I've certainly heard that from loads of people over the years, and it is a very, very real thing. There's that fear of judgment thing coming back in. But God, I can relate. I only took 4 months off after having our first daughter, Evie. Being self-employed at that time, I could not take a full year or even 9 months off for maternity leave. And I remember sitting in the car about to go and do my first one-to-one session with a client in Edinburgh. And it was the first time in 4 months that I'd been apart from Evie. So that was one thing. Um, just actually the effort that I went to deliver her to my mother-in-law
Yeah.
before this meeting was an extraordinary thing. All the kit and all the stuff
Yeah.
to drop her there for the time I was going to be away. It was an extraordinary experience. I remember sitting in the car before going into this office in west of Edinburgh, and I felt like my entire brain had been flooded with information about a baby over
Yeah.
the previous months. I mean, it was such a real thing. I remember feeling like my entire head was full of baby information, which I'd never had before, and that only a very tiny part was focused on the work. It was
Yeah.
really, really disconcerting. I remember feeling so much self-doubt, and I definitely lacked trust in my ability to be able to play at the top of my game that I had done only, 6 months before, 5 months before with clients. But that life event, a new little child, baby coming into your life, just completely changes everything, doesn't it? It's extraordinary.
Yeah, totally. And it's that is, I'm sure that's really relatable to a lot of your listeners. Certainly, I certainly felt it. I've got two children. I felt it both times I went back
Yeah,
to work. Totally knew I was still capable, but you just feel rusty. You just feel like, oh my God, everyone's going to have taken over, blah, blah, blah. And as you say, the hormonal change when we have children is immense. And as you know as well, possibly the brain fog is still there. And you haven't been immersed in work, you've been immersed in babies, then suddenly you're switching from one environment straight to the other.
yeah,
Really challenging.
yeah. Yeah, it's mad. With my second one, Poppy, I actually went back to work when she was 8 weeks old.
Did you? Oh,
But
wow.
that was a fear of losing the client.
Yeah.
I was so determined to stay on track for the business,
Mm.
that I arranged to have maternity care for Poppy, age 8 weeks. And it was only 2 days a week for 3 weeks. And then I didn't do anything else again for a few months. But yeah, that I could almost say that I lacked self-trust that the client would still come back to me.
Yeah.
So I was back on track, but that was my determination to still, fulfill what I was doing for them.
Good on you. That's amazing. Well, discipline for a start. Well, it's amazing drive as well, but it's also fear-based, isn't it? You had the fear that that client might leave you, and when you're running
Yeah.
your own business, that's a massive kind of
Yeah.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And then another one we've mentioned is returning to work after redundancy. And I think that's a situation where anyone's confidence could take a real beating after losing a job, especially through the redundancy, because it would be easy for someone to question their value, even though a redundancy is a corporate event. It's been made for reasons that the business has had to make. It's not necessarily to do with the individual themselves. Antonia, you do a lot of work with women experiencing the menopause. So can you talk about how that can impact as well?
Yeah, sure. Don't want to demonize perimenopause or menopause. It's a life stage, not a disease, and some women breeze through it. So we're just going to talk about kind of some women who were once seemingly confident in their role and in themselves. It can, due to their symptoms, make them feel more fearful, less sure of themselves, kind of anxious, and these are largely due to kind of the peaks and troughs of our reproductive hormones. So it's a very physiological, it's a very physiological thing, but the symptoms come out in various ways. And so even feeling anxious, you know what it's like, and that can lead to like a loss of self-trust. And it's a really confusing time for these women that it does affect. So women who've been in control within their work environment, who have been confident, who've been full of self-trust, are suddenly finding themselves full of uncertainty around their own abilities due to emotional, mental, and the physical changes occurring in their bodies. And I've been presenting kind of menopause workshops in businesses this past year, and some of the stats that I've found are just staggering. So 14 million days a year are lost to menopause related symptoms
That's in the UK.
in the UK. Yep.
Wow.
And Bupa research estimates 1 million women a year are pushed out of the workforce. And this is often due to a lack of confidence in their abilities or the fact that their symptoms become just too hard to manage alongside work, which is such a sad statistic. And which is why I'm so passionate about helping kind of workplaces kind of approach menopause in a really open, consultative way. Because as I say, some women will breeze through it and some women really don't.
Yeah.
There was a recent survey by the Balance app of 3,800 women, and they said 99% of women had sick days due to their symptoms. 21% passed up a promotion due to lack of confidence. 19% had to go down to reduced hours due to their symptoms, and 12% of those women resigned.
Cool.
Just couldn't cope at all. I mean, quite a shocking stat, right?
Yeah.
And definitely related to both self-confidence and self-trust.
Yeah. Shocking, really shocking stats. And I think it's such an unpredictable time, isn't it? When
Yeah.
many of the symptoms are physical. You're not going to know which day of the week they're going to show up or what time of the day they're going to show up. Or I've certainly experienced clients during sessions who are going through it who have spoken to me and said, "This is what I'm experiencing right now," so that I'm aware of what's happening, that it's just happening at that point of the day when we're there, maybe during a session. And yeah, you can see how, because it's unpredictable and it's out of your control, it
Yeah.
must be, it's such a tough period of your life, and how that could really erode your self-trust.
Oh, massively. As you say, it's the unpredictability, which is uncertainty. And as humans, we like certainty. So imagine just suddenly becoming uncertainty about everything because you don't know when you're next going to have that hot flush. You don't know when you're going to be overtaken by hormone-induced anxiety. You don't know when you're going to be not able to sleep that night. At nights, you've got a big presentation the next day. You're up for hours the night before with insomnia, menopause-related insomnia. Yeah, it can be a hugely challenging time. I think we talked last podcast about kind of negative self-talk as well, and that can really kind of get in the way menopausal women and our brain believes what we tell it. And if we suddenly start saying, "Oh, I'm not good at this, I'm not a natural," or "I'm really struggling with work," or "I'm not looking forward to going into work," or "I don't feel confident," then because our brains believe what we tell it, that becomes compounded. So it's really kind of I try and get menopausal women who are struggling to kind of change their negative self-talk, change their language, because your brain is always listening. It's kind of like kind of like fake it till you make it. Start telling your brain these, "All right, okay, I'm really looking forward to work tomorrow. Okay, I've done a presentation before really well. I can do it again." That kind of positive reinforcement that just makes the brain think, "Oh, okay, yep, she's not stressed, she's not freaking out. Actually, she's all right. We've got this." For that actually can be really quite powerful for anyone.
Yeah.
Men, in whatever stage of life, that kind of hear it bandied around a lot, don't you? Kind of positive self-talk, and it's not toxic positivity. We're not kind of saying be unrealistic, but it's just trying to catch yourself when you are speaking about yourself or to yourself negatively and trying to kind of just stop it there and kind of change the narrative, change your internal narrative.
Yeah. And I imagine, for many people, what we're doing day to day in our working lives, that is the thing that can help build self-trust and self-confidence.
Yeah.
So if you're finding yourself at a stage where whatever is going on around you is eroding that, it's having these tools and techniques to be able to bring yourself back and be able
Yeah.
to go back in to work or to do the job or the role that you're doing, and know that you can do it, because then you're layering back up the self-trust and not letting it get eroded.
Yeah.
It's a cycle, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. And I think also, with those stats you talked about, with people who reduce their hours or resigned or pass up promotion, you think, how much of that is people thinking, but what if X, Y, and Z happens? But what if?
Yeah.
And that doubt creeping in, whereas actually, equally, you think, but it might not happen.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to yourself more positively, going, just sign yourself up for that, or go on, put yourself forward for that promotion, just give it a shot, believe in yourself, then hopefully you build it back up.
Yeah.
But outside of all these more life events, I mean, I've got clients who've said they will actively avoid situations where they might have to present. They'd rather someone else does it instead, even when that someone else has asked them to deliver it. Their boss or their co-founder or whoever it is has specifically said, I want you to come up on stage and share this story. You would think that would show trust in their ability, and yet they are second guessing how it's going to go. They're filled with doubt.
Yeah.
And an example, an event that I worked on earlier in the year where I was supporting lots of speakers who were delivering 6-minute pitches on stage to about 250 people. There were a few individuals who'd been put forward to speak who were not necessarily, they weren't necessarily the CEOs of the businesses. They might be, some of them were maybe the more technical lead of their business, and they were up there presenting to tell the story of the technology that they'd created. And some of these individuals were incredibly nervous, no experience in presenting at all. It's not a part of their jobs day to day. So, of course, they were keen, get someone else on the team to do the pitch. But if you simply avoid uncomfortable situations, then the less confident you're going to become. It's going to work against learning to trust yourself. But what was brilliant was I had this program helping all speakers, and those individuals were within that program. And so with help and support and building that self-trust and support, not only from me, but from their peers and the groups as well, they did brilliantly and are all reaping the rewards, having got brilliant feedback on their pitches. And so I think that self-trust came first, and probably the chat and the feedback that myself and their peers was giving them was building that self-trust before the self-confidence was there. I wanted to have a think about how we can support clients to build their own self-trust. So we're going to go back over some of these life events we've talked about and just have a think about what we can do, what they can do to help themselves. So with job interviews, really important to prepare thoroughly, research the company, think about the kind of questions that they like to ask, and look at your CV and your application, anything you've sent in, and have a think about what questions those are going to stimulate. That preparation will start to build trust in yourself, your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Just as you were talking about, thinking about your mindset, reminding yourself that having sent in your CV or that application form, that company has invited you to interview. Trust that you've got something valuable to offer. They've seen that. I think rehearsing, really visualizing how the interview is going to go, think very positively, focus, practice how you're going to answer questions. And also, as I said, right near the start, often it's a difficult thing to do, but recognizing your accomplishments, the contributions you've made in your previous roles, writing down and recognizing your achievements.
Definitely, because sometimes when you've been doing something for a long time, you kind of look back and think, yeah, that's okay. Whereas other people would look at it and think, wow, look at that, or look at what you've done. Whereas for you, it's become your norm.
Okay, any tips on what to think about around changing careers?
Actually, I guess identifying any transferable skills. So listing out those skills you've developed in your current career that can apply to a new field. So you're not starting from scratch. So things like communication, leadership, problem solving. So pulling things out that you can ideally see on paper in black and white that you can transfer over. Again, just building your confidence, building your self-trust, taking actionable steps by starting small, some manageable actions like online courses, doing some online courses, networking with people in your desired field, perhaps volunteering in the new area, speaking to your friends, perhaps friends and family who've worked in the same area, because every small step you take is going to build your confidence and then your self-trust. Kind of talking again, I kind of just mentioned that, but talking to other people who've been there and done it, connecting with others who've made successful career changes, because hearing their stories will reinforce that change is possible, which will help you trust your own ability to navigate that shift. Reframing your doubts. So instead of focusing on what you don't know, which we all know is easy to do, focus on what you do know, what you do bring to the table from previous experience, and trust that you can learn and adapt. Think of examples where you've done this before. You've been in an old job and you have overcome, you've learned, you've adapted. It's what we do daily in life. It's just sometimes we forget what we've probably done it before.
Definitely. And I think that talking to other people is so important, and that talking to other people and saying, if you look at my CV, or if what accomplishments do you see, getting someone else's perspective, because as you say, it's very hard when you're in your own head to be
Yes.
able to see the skills you have. And yet, but talking to friends and family, or maybe colleagues or other people in your network, and getting their perspective can be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about for returning to work after family leave?
So this is where you want to kind of rebuild confidence gradually. So starting with the smaller tasks that you're comfortable with, kind of in time, taking on the more challenging projects as you kind of rebuild your rhythm and trust in the skills that you already have. But I always say here, just be careful not to avoid the uncomfortable tasks for too long, because the more you avoid, the less confident you might become, which then works against you trusting yourself in the long term. So start small, but don't avoid forever. Stay up to date. So before returning, spend time getting back up to speed with industry trends, read articles, attend webinars, have informal chats with colleagues. Perhaps you might want to book in a return to work day where you can just go in and shadow for the day. Just
Yeah.
be around the office. Set realistic expectations. Acknowledge it's normal to take time to adjust. Do not be expecting yourself to immediately perform at the same level as before. Just trust that you will get back into your groove over time. So the more you practice that, the more you go into the office, the more, you will relearn to build that confidence and self-trust. And get help. Talk to your colleagues, talk to mentors, fellow parents who are working, who can offer you that advice and reassurance because they've been there. And just like we said before, sometimes hearing other people's experiences just remind you that you're not alone in your feelings. It's really normal to feel like that.
Yeah, definitely. And then returning to work after redundancy, I think if you can try to separate the redundancy itself from your value, it is often a business decision and it's not necessarily a reflection of your own performance or abilities. And then start to apply for jobs which match your strengths and interests. But also, I think it could be helpful to look at other temporary or freelance work, because that can rebuild your self-trust and confidence in your abilities, and obviously help you to keep earning. I think that's really key. If you can keep active in your work, it helps to maintain that self-trust, that self-confidence. Maybe use that time as an opportunity to get new skills or refresh old ones, and that will help to improve your CV, but also reinforce that belief in your capabilities. But also, redundancy can be really emotionally tough. So allow yourself to be disappointed. Don't let it erode your self-trust. Try and be kind to yourself. And as you've already mentioned earlier, focus on what is in your control. And that is self-improvement, doing preparation around your job hunting, and taking steps forward.
Yeah. And I think in that steps forward, I've spoken to a few people who've been out the job market recently, and it's just kind of taking one step every day is one step more than you did the day before, and just helps you kind of feel that you are still moving forward, however small it is. Even if it's just one coffee networking with somebody from a similar industry, if that's all you do in a day, then you've still proactively done something about your situation.
Yeah.
Even if it's popping on to a half-hour seminar online, it's something that you've done to help the situation. That's kind of you taking control, which makes you feel like you've still got a handle on it all.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, those small steps, little goals that you might set yourself each week, just so that you know that you are achieving things and you're doing something to help the situation. Okay, brilliant. We're going to finish up with 5 practical steps to help build self-trust in ourselves. So, Antonia, do you want to kick this off, please? Yeah.
Okay, so daily affirmation. So we talked before about the brain believes what you tell it. So it's kind of speaking positively to yourself at the start of each day, kind of kicking off the day in that kind of positive mindset. Find some affirmations that work for you. And again, it's not toxic positivity. It's just kind of altering your mindset in a positive way that's only going to help you, and become aware of any negative self-talk. There's a simple technique I teach called catch it, challenge it, change it. You catch that negative self-talk, write it down, whatever's come up for you, so you make it visible. Then you look at it and you can challenge it. Challenge that kind of negative mindset. Where does it come from? What good does it do? And then what could you change it to become something more positive, and then focus on that instead? So it's catch it, challenge it, change it when you become aware of any negative self-talk. It's just quite a good practical exercise to stop that negative self-talk in its tracks. Another thing with clients I do, I get them to track their wins. So perhaps keeping a diary, journal, whatever you want to call it, of daily or weekly accomplishments, no matter how small, because reflecting on your wins reinforces trust in your abilities, and especially seeing it written out in black and white. It's really important, the visual aspect of it. Keeping in touch with those people who support and believe in you, whether that's friends, mentors, coaches, builds that positive reinforcement for self-trust.
Good. Okay. And then the last two, so focusing on learning. So each situation is a learning experience. So when you view challenges as opportunities to grow, it can reduce the pressure to be, perfect and getting everything right all the time, and can help to increase your trust in handling the unexpected. And finally, prepare and practice. So, one of the best ways to build self trust in your abilities when you're presenting is preparation and practice. So, whether it's a presentation, a speech, or a job interview, rehearsing makes you more familiar with the task and will help to reduce anxiety and build trust. Antonia, thank you so much. We've covered a few of the hotspots that we might face during our lives and careers where self trust can be an issue. I hope that this has been helpful to give ideas on what to work on to help you make good decisions and play to your strengths, to feel more calm and less anxiety about situations that are new to you or out of your comfort zone, and to help you feel ready and excited about new opportunities. We know that having objective, professional, expert feedback and skills, tips, and techniques that build trust in ourselves is invaluable, and we are here to help. I'm going to let Antonia tell you how to contact her.
Sure. If you want to learn more about me and my business, head to www.healthyhabitslife.co.uk. So I offer one-to-one mindset and behavior change coaching around life balance, stress management, and habit change. I've also got a 12-week online coaching program called the Reclaim Menopause Method, and this is to empower and educate women with science-backed lifestyle solutions for this life stage. It helps them kind of reclaim both their body and their mind. So for anyone experiencing challenges around this time of life, please feel free to go to my website, learn more about what I offer. My email address is antonia@healthyhabitslife.co.uk, and I'm currently offering a 10% discount for all Agile Speaker podcast subscribers.
So if you want to learn skills and strategies to help build your self-trust and becoming a great presenter, do head back to season 1, which focuses on preparing and delivering your presentations. Or get in touch via our website, www.mariannejohnston.co.uk. Finally, thank you for listening to season 5 of The Agile Speaker. If you're enjoying the podcast, please, please, please do rate and review it on the channel you subscribe to. Every single review helps to bump us up the league table and spread the word.